The Antonio Villaraigosa Leadership Award was first presented to Mayor Villaraigosa in 2012 in Orlando as he closed his term as president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, our nation's mayor. At that time, we announced the award would be named in his honor to recognize outstanding mayors from all backgrounds who are dedicated to bringing their diverse communities together to include us. Please welcome the 41st Mayor of Los Angeles, the Honorable Antonio Villaraigosa, for remarks and the award presentation.
First of all, I want to thank Mickey. You know, Mickey's one of those special people, and particularly for those of us in politics, from time to time you see internecine conflict, not just partisan conflict, but just the conflict of people vying for the same jobs. Mickey's been known in the Latino community as someone who brings us together. And the Latino Leaders Network, and why I think it's so special, isn't an organization that just honors Latinos. In fact, the vast majority of people we've honored at the Mayor's Tribute have not been Latinos. We honor people that bring people together. And now, more than ever, in a time where I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican or an independent or you don't care about any of that, I think we all got to ask ourselves, where are we going? What are we doing? And I think it's important right now that we acknowledge those people who understand we need leaders that bring us together. You know, when I go into a church, I talk about the shepherd. The role of the shepherd is to bring the flock in. It's not to exclude the flock. It's not to say that the one-eyed sheep can't come in. The black sheep, the white sheep, the brown sheep, everybody comes in. That's what we do when we bring people together. And this organization and this tribute, I think is very important, particularly right now. We had that conversation last night. Right now, we need people that understand we've got to include everybody. I love that story. Mayor, when you talked about the two waves of Anglos who've come to Albuquerque, the Native Americans who were there from the beginning, the Spanish settlers who mixed with those Native Americans and became Mexicans, or New Mexicans in your case. At the end of the day, that's what America's all about. You heard the mayor. Thank you, Regina. I loved your comments. I loved your passion. We need a country that comes together, everybody. We can't allow something like what happened in Uvalde, what happened in Buffalo, what's happened in synagogues, what happened at Walmart, what happened too often to occur and not understand we need leaders that bring us together. You know, when I was reading about Mayor Keller, he's a man who lives in a town that's very diverse. And he had the courage, and I haven't seen very many mayors campaign on this notion, I want to be an inclusive mayor. I want to focus on equity. I want us to be a city that grows together. He's turned the Department, I think, of Human Relations into a Department of Inclusion and Civil Rights. With metrics, everybody. Those of you, the mayors who are here, metrics are important because we could promise something, but mayors know we have to deliver. And you've done that, and you're doing that. And that's why we acknowledge you. Yo también quiero hablar un poquito en español. Soy tercera generación americano de herencia mexicana, No hablábamos español en la casa, pero después de casi 50 y pico años de defendiendo al inmigrante, ya me puedo defender. I said, you know, speak a little Spanish too. I want to thank the mariachi group who's here with us today. Thank you for the music. Yo también quiero dar las gracias, alcalde, a los meseros, a las meseras que están aquí. Gracias por servirnos. Por favor. So I have the honor today, and I'll be honest, I have a memorial service I have to go to tomorrow morning, 6 or so, but I had to be here to acknowledge a young man who's got this issue of equity and inclusion in his heart and has really made some great changes. And I think it's an example for the rest of us, no matter what city you live in. Bring as many people as we can together, particularly right now, in a united America, an America that understands you could come from Africa or Asia or Latin America or Europe. You can come from the North Pole. And if you want to be a part of the American dream, we ought to welcome you. We ought to celebrate you. And that's what we do tonight. We celebrate a mayor who believes in inclusion, who believes in this notion of equity, of focusing on the communities that have been left behind. Please help me in welcoming Mayor Tim Keller, the mayor of Albuquerque.
Oh, thank you. Well, it is wonderful to be here, and I want to just thank, especially, Mayor Villaraigosa, and of course, how awesome was it to have the Lieutenant Governor and former Governor President here? Thank you so much for coming and supporting our mayors from around the country. Let's give them a round of applause as well. For Albuquerque, this is a really, really special occasion. And so I want to share a few things, but I also want to share that, the 20-something me, if you said name two mayors to myself like 20 years ago, I would have said Mayor Chavez, that was Albuquerque's mayor, some of you remember, and Mayor Villaraigosa. So what an honor to get this award and celebrate it with our city and with you. And in 2022, it's an amazing, I think, American story. So thank you so much for all you've done for putting this together and for Los Angeles and for America. Now, I think I want to share just some remarks with you. I know Mickey keeps a tight schedule. And, look, yeah, nice. Well, here's the good news. I mean, I don't think my remarks are up here, so you're gonna get some real off the cuff stuff. Oh, there we go. So let's do a little filibuster there for a minute. First, how many have been to the Duke City? A few. I mean, how many of you have seen Breaking Bad, Don't Lie, Better Call Saul? All right, so you haven't been there, but you've seen that. We're not going to talk about that today, but we at least love that we're included in some of those shows, and we got a great film industry. But what I do want to share with you is, our town is pretty old. We're 318 years old. And of course, those of you, Brian mentioned a little bit about history. I love history. And of course, the history of New Mexico is fascinating. And I'm not going to talk about it too much tonight, but I want to share with you just a few aspects that have made us the city that we are. And, tonight I'm reminded that the city of Albuquerque is special to me. It has formed who I am as a person. It has formed my values. I came back explicitly met my wife there, started a family there. It's defined our family as well. And so, like all mayors, right, we love our city. We all think our cities are special. But I know Albuquerque is special to me in terms of foundationally as a person. So I refer to myself as a Burqueño. Some of you might not have heard that term. That's what people from Albuquerque call themselves, even if they're not Latino. That's who we are. We're Briqueños. And when you're a Briqueño, I also know that I'm Irish Catholic, and I grew up middle class, look, plenty of white privilege, lots of ignorance. And it took me at least a decade to understand how special the place was that I grew up in. And, I think when you see anyone who thinks a little bit about her, who is an activist in New Mexico or familiar with the Chicano movement or the Latino movement in different aspects of our country, you know that in Albuquerque we have deep, powerful roots of resistance. And those roots of resistance, they still are all around us in New Mexico. Somebody mentioned sopapillas earlier. Look, our food, our music, our language, our Spanglish, our traditions. It is all around you in Albuquerque that we are a minority-majority city. So much so that term doesn't even make sense to us. We've always been that. In fact, it's a little bit of the reverse. When you come to Albuquerque, you basically have to honor the living Latino culture and history. And I will tell you, especially if you want to survive in politics. So I came back home after being gone for about 10 years, and Brian shared some of my sojourns in Cambodia and other places. But I got involved in community organizing in a place called the International District. Believe it or not, in that era it was called the War Zone. And I later became their state senator, and my first bill was to rename that community because they felt that term, the War Zone, for the most dense, the most of color, and the lowest income district in the entire state of New Mexico, was derogatory and racist. And we renamed that district. It's still called the International District today. But it was the experience in the Senate where I really learned about our state. And I also learned about political power, and I learned about Chicano leadership. If any of you, I know a lot of mayors have been in state legislatures, and of course governors have had to work with them, but the Senate caucus in New Mexico has for a long time been majority Latino. And when you come into an environment like that, with my kind of background, you quickly brush up on your Spanish. You also learn the difference between güero and carnal. You know when to turn your head and when not to turn your head. And some other words, too, I cut out of this because they're a little more racy. But look, you also learn about the fight in New Mexico against the American colonizers. And it was a fight for our language, for Spanish. And it actually resulted in a 60-year delay in why we became a state. And we're the only state where Spanish is guaranteed in the Constitution. You also learn about the Chicano reclamation of power in the 70s because it had been taken by the Anglo movement in the 50s. And that continues even in the 90s where we had something called the Norteño movement. All of this is New Mexico stuff, but all of it means that I learned a whole lot from a lot of people. And I'm indebted to our Latino leadership for making me who I am today. And I also know you got to learn to dance the ranchera. So, when you got Governors Martinez and Lujan, you better be ready to get up there when the mariachis come on. And so I know, though, that despite our Latino heritage, the forces of assimilation and of racism, they are, of course, alive and well in our city, just like everywhere else, unfortunately, in America. And I'll tell with you just a short, small story. I was sworn in as the 10th mayor of Albuquerque. That doesn't make any sense. 10th mayor, we've been around for so long. And so I had our historians look into this. And of course, they found out, I live one block from Alcalde Street. And all of that history had been whitewashed out. It was as if Albuquerque was born in the 1970s. And we changed that now, by the way. We now have murals in the convention center and in the mayor's office and in the history museum that tell our whole history, from alcaldes to mayors. But I know I'm here today because of Latino leadership and Latino mentorship. And I know that I also run the city on the shoulders of a city cabinet that is 65% Latino. All our police chiefs, fire chiefs are Latino. And it's never lost on me that I was elected by the Latino vote. And so I know that they've entrusted me for a couple of things. One is to honor those roots of resistance, but also because resistance today is not just about conflict. It's about resisting the divisive forces that we heard about earlier today, that unfortunately we've come to expect in America. It's about a defiant commitment to building bridges towards each other, what Mayor Villagrosa spoke of. And it's doing that instead of building up walls that divide us. So I know some of the mayors are here in 2017 when there was the child separation issue at the border and the wall. And look, we came in, I have never been so proud of the mayors who showed up on a bipartisan basis on the border to protest what was happening to those families. And you all inspired me. I came back and I told our newly informed Office of Equity and Inclusion they knew what was happening, and actually some of them went with me on the trip. But I said, what are we going to do about this in Albuquerque? Because we're pretty close to the border. How are we going to help Las Cruces and our friend Mayor Miyagishima? And they came up and they said, this is the beginning of our Office of Equity and Inclusion. You know, I ran on that when no one knew what those words meant. And I had to spend time in TV debates explaining the difference between equity and equality. And now, fortunately, people know a little bit more. They understand a little bit more about those terms. But I want to let you know that we decided that our roots of resistance in that environment, it meant that we had to stand up against the separation of families, against the othering of humans. And it meant that we had to do something on our end to build a bridge for those individuals who were dehumanized. And we had to honor fundamentally who we were as a city. We are a city of immigrants and of indigenous peoples. We stand for bridges, not walls. And so we publicly and defiantly stood in the face of the presidential administration at the time. And we said, we welcome those refugees. We spent thousands, actually hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars providing hotel rooms for those families, health care, food. Thank you. And look, people say, well, you can't use government resources. We use city buses. We use city law enforcement. We used everything we could to help those families. And we did it in the face of public derision nationally from our president at the time and against the threats of loss of funding. But Albuquerque understood fundamentally that that could have been our family, right? That could have been my brother-in-law. They needed a bridge into America, and we wanted to help with that bridge. And the U.S. Conference of Mayors stood with us. Thank you so much, mayors, for standing up in that era. So we have a saying in our city. It's called One Albuquerque. And for us, that's become a clarion call for us to play a role in unifying our city, for living out what Mayor Villaraigosa spoke of. And it's a commitment that it says it doesn't matter where you came from or when you got here. You are part of our community. And so for us, when we think of One Albuquerque, that's what guided us through COVID. And our Office of Equity and Inclusion did the same thing during COVID. They said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do COVID response through an equity lens. And so we gave $30 million out in aid, and we never asked for documentation. And we still don't today. We helped every single person in our community, no matter what. And then we said, let's look at our neighborhoods. We got all this infrastructure money, and it was like, where has the money been going in our community? It's been going, of course, to the more affluent neighborhoods, the newer neighborhoods, or we divide it 9 ways because we have 9 counselors. That's wrong. It should go to the communities that need it most. That is institutional discrimination. So we reverse that. $100 million now going to our Latino historic neighborhoods, our communities of color, all because of the Office of Equity and Inclusion, which didn't follow orders from the emergency responders or our planning department. It was the reverse. In Albuquerque, they're cabinet level, and they give the orders. That's why we were able to do this. That's why our office is so effective. So I want to just share with you, I think, one other piece about our story in Albuquerque. And it, again, is about that Office of Equity and Inclusion. When we had the summer of social justice reckoning, when we had also high crime in our town, which we still have, and we had to reconcile 2 things in our community. Crime is going up. We don't have enough police officers. How do we support fighting crime? And then communities who said they wanted a different response. They didn't need a police officer. They needed help. And our Office of Equity and Inclusion came up with the concept of creating an entirely new response. Our community safety department is now up and running. It's an alternative response to 911. It is fully funded. It's got $15 million. It's got 50 plus social workers. It's taking 2,000 calls away from cops and also giving the response that we need in the community. That has been the power of our Office of Equity and Inclusion. It's starting new ideas, it's building bridges, and it's tearing down walls. So for us, thank you. So let me wrap up by just saying, going forward, it's our call to honor, I think, that spirit of resistance and also the ability to build bridges that, of course, is at the forefront of today's political challenges. We've talked a lot about what happens in our communities with gun violence, about extreme ideologies that are fueling mass tragedies on a city-by-city level. We all say the names of the towns we remember, and even those that we never want to forget, whether it's Buffalo, Uvalde, El Paso, Sutherland Springs. We know that communities, unfortunately, communities of color feel the deepest wounds. There is a correlation right now between gun violence and equity and racism. And that is yet another reason why I was so glad to see our vice president today and all our mayors join in unison to say we have reached a breaking point. We absolutely have to have action from our Congress. So resistance now, I believe, means standing up against the gun lobby. Let's just be clear. We cannot let them push us around. Resistance also means standing up against white supremacy. That was explicitly what Buffalo is about. And for our immigrant communities, resistance means standing up against assimilation policies. They are alive and well in so many school districts all across America, and we have to fight that battle as well. So I know that every person here tonight is part of building those bridges. So I want to thank you for coming this evening. And I know whether it's even our corporate sponsors, their commitment to diversifying boards or to diversifying management or even having Latino and Latina voices in advertising, or it's the mayors who are dedicated to looking through things with an equity lens. We're all part of the bridge building that happens today, including, of course, this very network. That's what it's all about, building those bridges. And our master bridge builder, Mickey Ibarra, let's recognize him again. Thank you so much, Mickey. Thank you for connecting us tonight. Thank you for showing us the way forward. And on behalf of Albuquerque, New Mexico, thank you so much. Mil gracias. Thank you.